For more on the rather complicated situation in South Sudan, we're joined by Michael Clyne. He's an international security expert who focuses on Africa. Michael, before I get to the arms embargo, I want to talk about these brutal attacks we've seen against UN diplomats, peacekeepers, international aid workers. What is going on in South Sudan? Why so much hostility against outsiders?
South Sudan, a country that's known almost nothing but war for its existence, both since and before independence, has to be one of the most difficult and challenging places in the world for peacekeepers to operate. People there know, like I said, little, but being in a state of conflict, there's no infrastructure. And lately, peacekeepers and foreigners have become a target themselves. This has been happening increasingly since over the summer, when the last iterant ceasefire fell apart. And some of the peacekeepers that were mentioned in the piece earlier were accused of not living up or reaching to the highest standards, abandoning posts, commands, while particularly the capital, Juba, fell into disarray. Since then, they've become targets themselves, as well as the foreign aid community. And that spells a very troubling situation for a country in such disarray as South Sudan.
And how much does that disarray, the strife that we're seeing in South Sudan, how much is that translating into these attacks that we're seeing against foreigners?
Yeah, we've seen everything from foreigners and peacekeepers being targets of violence themselves to being denied medical care. And it is, I believe, an elite strategy coming from the top of the South Sudanese political structure, which really has commandeered this perpetual conflict into an elite struggle between two factions, that of the President Salva Kiir and his nemesis, a man by the name of Riek Machar. While Riek Machar is out of the country and Kiir is trying to consolidate power, he has found some utility in scapegoating international aid workers, peacekeepers, and making them a so-called enemy of the citizenry of South Sudan and stymieing further peacekeeping or UN efforts.
And what about thousands of displaced civilians? What is life like for them?
It's millions, really, because it's been going on for decades, not just since 2013. They are living both within South Sudan in dire conditions and in refugee camps in Uganda that are saturated to levels that we're used to really only seeing in the Middle East. You have an economy that is in complete collapse. 90% of the government revenue comes from oil. Well, with the drop in oil price earlier this year and the force majeure of oil companies in South Sudan, that's been completely depleted the country of foreign reserves, with inflation skyrocketing to over 700%. Currency is virtually worthless, commodities, even food, unaffordable. And the South Sudanese population really sees themselves again as a pawn among this conflict of the elites of their young country.
Young country indeed, but so many problems. Michael Clyne, thank you so much for being here.
Pleasure.